Good afternoon or good morning, and welcome to the July session of the NAM Energy Pulse Briefing. We're thrilled to welcome our energy market experts from the NAM Energy Program and our partner organization, Environ. Thanks so much for being here, Ben. We're going to be taking a closer look at growth forecasts between key energy markets right now in the United States as things start to heat up, as well as changes to CP and capacity across those markets. But without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ben. Thanks so much for being with us today, Ben.
Yeah, thank you, Jack, and thank you for everyone joining. I'll reiterate good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast and anybody in a different time zone, good morning. Just wanted to remind everyone that we've been partners with NAM since 2008, and we're just very excited to have this check-in with you all. If you want to add questions now, or if you want to follow up with them afterwards, we'd love to tailor some advice directly to your specific markets and your specific situation. That said, today is going to be a bit of an overview of a few different markets. So if I miss something that's unique to yours, please reach out. So very briefly, wanted to talk about some of the different levels, different happenings at the different ISOs and what those forecasts are. So by ISO, that stands for Independent System Operator. You never need to worry about that acronym ever again. Sorry for even using it, but that differentiates what's an energy market with choice, where you can choose your supplier. Sometimes that's called a deregulated market or a restructured market. And it separates that sort of an approach from what's called a regulated market, where you are served your energy by your local utility. Regardless of whether you're in a regulated or a deregulated area, your utility delivers your power, so you always get a delivery invoice from them. In a regulated area, you get one invoice that has both your delivery and supply charges on it. In a deregulated area, you get one invoice for your delivery and then a different invoice from your energy supplier. And so in energy markets, which we're going to go through a few here, but Texas is an energy market. PJM, which is the Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland, and other mid-Atlantic states. So Ohio is in that, Delaware's in that, Maryland's in that. And then you have New York ISO as its own market, and then you have ISO New England, which covers the New England states. So those are the four energy markets we're going to go into real quick today. And we're going to look at what their energy forecasts look like. So these energy markets, they take a look at all the things that are happening in their region, from generators that are asking to join, and as well as large load asking to join the market. So in both cases, those are called the interconnection queue. So if you are a large load, like a data center or a manufacturing plant or even a hospital, you would need to request to connect to the grid. And they will do their analysis to make sure the grid can handle delivering you enough power or gas, if we were looking at that. But they do the analysis to make sure that you can take power off the grid without blowing things up. Same thing on the generation side. If you ask to connect to the grid, you will join the interconnection queue, and they want to make sure that you can provide power and push power down into the wires and the transformers and the poles without causing problem. What's notable across PJM, which is what we're looking at here today, is that we've seen a lot of data center growth arrive really in the last 18 months. And so you can see on the left, this is the actual energy that has been used by that region over the last, almost 30 years, right? 98 to 25. And you can see it was fairly consistently around 800,000 gigawatt hours per year. And then with data centers, there's a little bit of other load growth from electric vehicles or things like electrification, especially when we get into the New England, New York regions. You'll see electrification of heat, another driver of load growth. But you see these really, really almost scary looking steep increases in expected power consumption across the region. So this is doing a few things around the PJM region. For one, it's actually pushing up prices. So of note here, we talked about the regulation versus deregulation, kind of these energy markets. Those really began around 2001-ish. And so if you look, we've never had an energy market try to function in an area of load growth. If we were to take this, the data kind of started in 98 because that's when this market was kind of first forming. If we were to take this back to say the 40s or even the 20s, you would see consistent growth. The U.S. was built monopoly power from the days of Edison in the late 1800s all the way up until this year 2000. So we had 120 years of growth, and we did all that growth under a monopoly structure. Markets arrived right as growth flatlined. And so, markets arrived right as this growth just started to be flat. And so we're starting to test markets in a way that they've never been tested before. The way we've built our markets has been on this idea of incremental. And so, whatever the incremental cost is, that's what's kind of borne by everybody. And that is coming under question. There's some regulatory changes across all the markets trying to figure out what is the right way to allocate costs. So that's a lot of words to say that the PJM grid is expecting to grow. And I want to make a distinction between the actual energy usage and demand. So if you attended last week, we talked last month, we talked a fair amount about the difference between demand and energy. Energy is the electricity you use over time. Demand is the electricity used instantaneously. And so this is on the left, all the electrons across the year. And on the right, it's the peak number of electrons at one given hour, one snapshot. And you can see that similarly, the peak demand had been fairly stable around 150,000 megawatts. And then the purple line was that forecasted expected growth. So it's not quite as aggressive as the growth of consumption, but it's still pretty strong growth in that Ohio, Virginia, Pennsylvania, even parts of Illinois, right? All of these areas kind of fall into this PJM region. I put the little diamond on here to just say that on July 2nd, we had beginning of July, we had a big heat wave that came through the eastern US. And the peak for PJM was 168-ish, 168,000 megawatts. So we're still finalizing the number, but that yellow diamond shows what that peak is. Note that that's the highest demand we've ever seen in the region. It beat a 20-year-old record, the standing record from 2006 back here. And it's also quite a bit higher than what was forecasted for this summer. Extreme heat will do that, but it also points to this idea that demand is definitely growing and even growing faster than was predicted 3 to 6 months ago when some of these forecasts were put out. So as a buyer, you should absolutely be paying attention to your demand charges. So in PJM, this is capacity. We actually have a capacity auction for the 28-29 planning year, where the results will be released today at 4 p.m. Eastern. So I will be sitting there refreshing my page, but this is going to be the third auction in a row we expect to clear at this $300 per megawatt range. The first time it cleared that way was, kind of alarm bells. The total spend in the region went from like 2 billion to 16 billion or something. So huge increases, and we expect kind of those huge prices to carry forward. So high attention to your demand charges in the region. The other thing is there's just, because of the increasing energy use, there's significant price risk anywhere out into the future. And so whether you want to sit and wait and hope that some of the data center growth just doesn't appear, or whether you're willing to kind of dip your toe into a high-priced environment and try to take some of that risk off the table. You're kind of in a weird position of potentially buying high so that prices don't get higher, which is kind of a weird place to be, but it's kind of where the demand forecasts are pushing us. Moving on to Texas, we see a very similar story, but a little bit more exaggerated. So PJM, a lot of the data centers that are joining PJM are especially focused in Virginia, Maryland, and Ohio. So those are the regions that see the most growth. But if you're a data center and you're looking to place yourself, you're probably looking at one of those 3 states or ERCOT if you want to be in a market, or Texas. And so Texas has had the AI revolution is really what pushed data centers to the forefront in the last 2 years. Data centers started coming to Texas 5 years ago on the really starting with the crypto wave, and so there was a big wave of data centers that came into Texas for crypto reasons. That market has favorable regulations in that it's a very much a price-driven environment. Fewer of those demand type charges we were talking about, and so it's a lot easier for a crypto miner to ramp up and down their usage because there's more clear price signals. And so Texas kind of had a jump start on this, and they're seeing significant load growth. At least that's what they're forecasting. They are running into some regulatory challenges as well as just physics limitations of how fast we can build things. There's supply chain issues. The global natural gas turbines we're trying to buy people. There's orders above the maximum capacity, right? And so if you want to try to buy a natural gas generator right now, you're probably 3 years out, even to just kind of get one purchased, let alone shipped and constructed and everything else. I will note that the El Nino weather pattern that we are having pushes down temperatures in Texas, and so the July peak for them was actually quite a bit lower than any sort of a concerning level. They are expecting a peak later this August, kind of when they have their heat wave, whenever that happens, which tends to happen in Texas in the summer. And when that heat wave comes, we are expecting to set a new record in Texas, but we haven't set that yet. Similarly, you're seeing kind of these big spikes of load of annual consumption. Of note, right, just to put some of this in scale, there's 80,000 megawatts-ish is the peak, and you've seen Texas is has been growing a little bit more than PJM was. PJM was flat. Texas is actually growing. So we're at 85,000 is our current peak. There's 410,000 of load that wants to come online, which is matched by about 470,000 megawatts of generation that wants to come online. We talked about the interconnection queue earlier. So if there's 80,000 megawatts on the grid now, there's 400,000 megawatts on the grid of load that is asking to connect. And so ERCOT is struggling to address this as fast as they can. They've adapted this batch zero process where they're going to kind of ask for everybody to come in and then they'll review what the grid looks like. Rather than a series of one-off analyses, they're kind of trying to put a bunch together and analyze it all at once to speed up the throughput. They've also, I think this was yesterday, pushed data centers to kind of make a decision on what sort of firm generation they want to get matched with. Do they want firm generation? In which case they have a cap, and so you might have a 100 megawatt site, and they come back and say you can only get 50. That's it. Or are they willing to be turned down by the grid, where they are forcibly have their electricity shut off in times of high demand? The third option is they have to bring their own generation, and so they have it on site. Again, going back to those gas turbines being 3 years out, and so data centers have like weeks to figure out which answer they want, and then the grid will accept those answers and try to roll them up. All that to say, it's hard to get a data center powered up in Texas if you aren't already well through the queue. For pricing in the region, we're definitely seeing prices actually pretty favorable, which is somewhat surprising given these dynamics. A lot of that comes from, again, they had a head start on some of these challenges. They kind of knew in 2022 that data centers were coming, whereas everybody else kind of caught the AI wave in 24. And we're seeing a lot of solar and wind and gas generation, kind of all sorts of different technologies coming onto the grid, which has helped keep prices at a reasonable level. It's still a summer peaking grid, and I personally have some concerns about what a summer heat wave might do to prices. But if you're a buyer in this region, now is a great time to take a look at like a 3 to 5 year contract. As one of my Houston colleagues put it, just take the risk off the table and let the dust settle, and then kind of figure it out. And I think that's a really strong approach right now to consider in Texas. Out in New York, so we're going to go through New York and then we're going to go through New England. Both of those regions don't have the same data center push. They are still seeing some growth, but data centers care about the cost of land and the cost of power. Those are two of their biggest cost drivers. And both of those are expensive up in the New York, New England region. And so while we do see some growth in both those regions, a lot of it's driven by regional electrification, which comes on the back of climate focused, carbon focused standards, whether you've heard of building performance standards or things like Local Law 97 or BERDO in Boston when we get there. These are driving kind of a redirection of energy sources away from gas and towards power a little bit more. New York again had this heat wave, and their diamond was above what was expected, and so even this year, this summer, we've already set a peak above what they thought was coming, but less, I would say, less substantially above than we saw in PJM, and we still are kind of avoiding some of these record highs we saw. A lot of that in New York has been aided by behind the meter solar. They have a goal of 10,000 megawatts, right? So their total peak across the entire state is in this 33,000 megawatt range. They're trying to get 10,000 megawatts of distributed solar, and they're at 8,000. 10,000 by 2030 is the goal, and they're at 8,000 now. So they have done a lot in the last really 6 to 8 years. They've added 5,500 megawatts in the last 8 years. So they've done a lot to try to keep that demand value down by, solar helps produce power at when demand is highest, because that's when the sun's shining. And so you do see some growth forecasts with electrification. This is probably the region that's most in the kind of same old situation. There are some challenges specifically within the city where they're seeing generation retirement and there's not new load coming online. And so the buffer, what's called reserve margin of generation to load, is shrinking. And so they are the grid operators are more and more worried, but it's the most consistent market that we've I would say, that we're looking at today in terms of what's going on. What else about New York? Prices are in New England and New York very much on the high side. And so if I was a buyer in New York, you could take a look at that. You could take a look at any sort of on-site equipment, kind of helps you insulate you from that. But I would really just hope that we might have a mild winter. We've had 2 consecutive really cold winters, and winter premiums are what drive the Northeast markets, both on gas and on power. And so if we have a mild winter come in, hopefully that'll help knock down some of those risk premiums. But there's really not much in the way of price relief unless we get that. So you can either kind of buy now, or you can kind of sit and wait and hope. Moving on to New England, similar graphs here to show that there's not a lot of load growth, and then even the demand forecast is pretty muted. I will say that New England is currently reevaluating its capacity market to move to a seasonal market as well as a prompt market. The details of that we don't need to go into today, other than to say the details haven't been finalized. The grid this region is in the middle of a kind of a 3-year pause on capacity auctions while they figure out what's next. And they have suggested a 2-year transition before they get to that final market. What that means is any sort of an on-site equipment planning, just really hard to know what the future looks like beyond 2028, 2030 in terms of demand versus energy. And so you can certainly get some equipment there, but there's a lot of unknowns in terms of whatever that analysis would look like. The region is also set to have winter demand surpass summer demand in the 2030s. New York is on that same trajectory, but that's like a 2050 target for them. But New England might start to see a significant power draw in the winter just due to the electrification from that region, which again comes on the back of some of the building performance standards like BERDO. Even Maryland has their BEPS for the PJM region. So if you're subject to any of those. So just some quick comments for you all about The regional changes to the capacity. I'll start on the bottom right, which is the New England, which is where we just finished. I mentioned all these things just now of evolving to a seasonal market and a prompt market. And then there's a 2-year transition that was just floated last week. We still don't know the details yet. Moving to the left of New York ISO, I mentioned the solar and if you are in New York City, we saw Zone J capacity prices at like $30 a kilowatt month. And for the first 2 months for the May, June, and then they fell down to like 12 and change for July, excuse me. We would expect 20 as an average. So we've seen really volatile capacity prices, which is pretty abnormal. A lot of that stems from the Champlain Hudson Power Express line, CHIPE, CHPE, the new transmission line that just connected New York City to Canada for hydropower. So that was connected in May, but was still fairly non-operational. It was operating at only like 10%. So hopefully that new resource will keep capacity prices muted moving forward. But if you get any surprise bills in the next 2 months, now you know why. PJM, I mentioned this as well. The capacity auction has closed, but we don't get results until later today. So very much excited to see what that is. And then PJM is also running a separate backstop auction specifically for data centers. So we talked about some of the regulatory responses that the grid is taking to all of this new load growth. One of the things they're doing is changing how their market structure works. I mentioned earlier the kind of additional or incremental costs being borne by everybody. Because of the scale of growth that we're seeing in PJM, they're shifting away from that model and saying data centers have to pay for their incremental growth, and then the rest of the load would be insulated from that. ERCOT, I mentioned batch zero. I forgot to mention this one, which is currently in ERCOT, your demand charges are based on the June, July, August, September, so the 4 summer months. And they're considering moving to tracking your demand across all 12 months. So moving from a 4 CP system to a 12 CP system. There was a vote, a unanimous vote last week that was pushing this direction. Other than, but it's still an open comment period through early August there. So steps are being taken, but nothing's finalized there. I do expect that to happen in that region. Wanted to take also a brief chat about natural gas supply and demand. So we talked about the load growth forecasts for power. If you were to look at demand growth forecasts for gas, you would draw your attention to the bottom right chart here, which is just to show that we are up on both power burn. So we just talked about electricity markets. So we're seeing increasing need for natural gas for electricity generation. That's the green bar. Also seeing growth in exports. That's the purple section. Those are the two that tend to drive natural gas supply and demand figures. The total year over year increase in 2027 is 4.5 BCF per day. So we expect to need 4.5 more BCF per day. If you look at the top chart, we will have 4.0 BCF per day of new supply available. So there's a little bit of a shortfall in 2027. But notably, 2027 natural gas prices are setting 3-year lows. So if you are looking at any sort of an open position in 2027, you have significant opportunity to close up that position and kind of lock in low prices. Really through fall of 2028, we're seeing pretty favorable natural gas prices. I would recommend you at least take a look at your contract there and see if you have an opportunity. And a lot of that's stemming from the strong associated gas. So we have not enough oil in storage, so we're projecting pretty strong oil production. When we produce oil, we get kind of gas out of the ground with it on accident out of West Texas, where we get a lot of oil from. And so as we have low oil reserves, we have high oil production, and therefore we have higher natural gas price of production, and therefore lower natural gas prices. So to get you to that image, this is what that looks like. So our strategic petroleum reserves hit 42-year lows. This is, the tracker of the SPR, and you can see, we built it pretty steadily over some decades, and then we withdrew quite a bit for COVID response. We started rebuilding it, and then we started withdrawing again for the recent Iran situation, the Strait of Hormuz and everything. So we are now at a level that is the lowest in over 40 years. And so we need oil production to replenish this, which is why it's kind of bearish for natural gas prices. And then this is just showing that prices are indeed towards the bottom, right? And so you can see the blue shaded region here is the 3-year trade range of natural gas, and then the dotted black line is the current natural gas price, with, again, the diamond way to the left to say that today's prices are better than 100% of the past 3 years. So very much appreciate everyone jumping in. If you want to talk about your situation or read the best practices on energy procurement, this is available to you. And wanted to just thank everyone for their time and remind you that we'll be back at it August 18th.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Ben. Really appreciate those insights and interesting to see how much is in motion. The dynamics are changing quickly between different regional energy markets, particularly with changes to CP systems and differing load forecasts. So we thank everyone for joining the NAM Energy Pulse for July. As Ben mentioned, the next session will be on August 18th. We look forward to seeing you there.